As we go into the new year, we wanted to talk about some of the logistical tasks and things that we do to stay connected as a couple and as a team in our home. We recently had Zach Watson on our podcast talking about the mental load that we each carry. And he shares what he and his wife call the boring meeting of when they discuss the logistics of their home. And we like to call them our weekly business meeting. And so today we're going to share what that looks like, what we discussed during that meeting, and how we can connect also emotionally during that meeting. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tiara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. And together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we are so glad you're here.
Yes. Hello, world. Happy New Year.
Hi, friends.
Yes.
So it's really interesting in just the timing of this and us even talking, because there's so many different levels of this kind of thought, idea, and conversation. Because even as the Connection Codes team, we have had, last week, we had a day together where we just talked about reflecting over the year. And we start there before we ever even talk about what's coming up this year.
Totally.
And it is really helpful. But one of the things we talked about was being more intentional with seeing each other, because we do have a weekly meeting, but we talked more about that relationally. And then I'm definitely in this moment of feeling guilt and shame, because one of the things we talked about last week was
doing the wheel.
Doing the wheel every time we show up.
That's a neat idea.
And we did not do that this morning when we showed up. Oh my goodness. So that's just a confession right there, and definitely a moment of guilt and shame, because that is something we even miss on. And we talked about that last week, just how important it is that we don't assume that we are always aware of each other's emotions. To me, it's that the power of the wheel. And I know in our private practice, we start sessions with the wheel. And it's interesting because even early this morning, we had a session, and we probably, 60 seconds of chit chat. And then I said, let's start with the wheel. And then it all broke loose, as in, whoa, they had a super intense 24 hours, but I don't know where we would have got, how long it would have taken to have gotten to that.
Right.
Totally.
But man, when you do the wheel right off the bat, you get to it really fast. And I think that's where this is that moment, right? To say, even in starting off the new year, to look at how can we do better in our business? Because this is the Connection Codes for us three. This is business for us as far as how we show up in this space. And how do you navigate this? And I do envision down the road someday being able to even talk, like, how have we built this through friendship, through business, through all of that? Because those are some real challenges.
Yeah.
And people often talk about that. Don't mix business and friendships and all of those things. Like, how do we use the Connection Codes to navigate hard conversations, disagreements, and all the things? And that's part of what, even last week, we said we got to do the wheel every time we get together for those reasons, like to show up in that space and to know, I want to know you're sad. I want to know all of the things. What's been the fear in the last 24 hours for you? And that is that. But that's what I was thinking of as we were starting this podcast, is that even for us, it's really important to go back to those things. And the idea of a business meeting has been a part of our lives for a very long time. And I was trying to think of I'll be curious to know your memory of when it started. I'll tell you mine. We had moved from Boston to South Carolina, and our finances were a mess. And it was like we were starting over. And we had someone that sat down and said, do you understand a budget? And we're like, no. And this person helped us to understand that whole idea of income and outgo, like that you got to have more on the incoming finances versus the outgoing. And
Yeah, and that was such a big thing, I think, for both of us, but certainly for me, that I thought finances were this mystical, magical thing. You either got it, it's like being double jointed. You either were or you weren't. You were born with it. And the individual we were sitting with, she got it, and I just thought, well, I'm not gifted in that. And not realizing that it's just math. It has nothing to do with personality profile or anything. And I remember that meeting when she said, there's only 2 columns. There's income and there's outgo. I was like, what about the other 19 columns? I just thought there's some hazy, fog-filled room. And she's like, no, there's just 2 categories. And that was huge for us because we had no concept of that.
And that led us to having weekly business meetings because it was let's take it 1 week at a time so we can figure out what is happening on that level of our lives. And when we had that very first meeting with her, and then it led to the 7 days later having another meeting where we, with each other, where we sat down and we were like, okay, let's look at it. I just remember both of us thought, this is not doable. You're just lucky. You're either lucky or you're not. And at that point in our lives, we were young. Our debt seemed unmanageable. Like there's no way we could ever get on the other side of this. And because we didn't understand how, in a sense, simple the math is. And that began our weekly meetings where we would come into this space saying, okay, what went well last week and what does this week look like? And we started talking about things. And I wonder if there aren't many couples out there that are and were similar to us in the sense of just thinking, this is too complicated to talk about. This is too painful to talk about. This is too scary to talk about. We definitely can understand that. And when the first week came and then we had those 7 days and then we checked back in, it was like, oh my word, we actually did the thing.
Right, met our goal.
We met the goal. And then we set the next goal. And then before we knew it, we were at the end of the month and it was like, oh my word, we actually made a little progress in the debt and we still have a few dollars extra. And it just started changing how we looked at life. Like we're not just victims in this story, but we actually have an ability to check in with each other.
And that's what was so startling is we realized that we could be intentional. I still have the sheet of paper. It was a handwritten sheet of paper, our very first budget. And we set up this is in the 80s. We were still in our 20s. And we were $38,000 in debt, which for us, with our income level at the time, was like, we're just counting on Jesus coming back because that's the only possible solution to this debt scenario. And I actually remember sermons I would hear that would even say that. And I was like, oh, yes, my goodness, that'd be so amazing if Jesus just comes back and then we don't have to pay all this money back. And just for the record, the vast majority of that money was not from buying diamond rings and cars. It was from giving money to the church that we were a part of, which was incredibly foolish on my part because I would always donate just extra money to different causes. And that's a long, boring podcast in and of itself someday. But so we'd end up in all this debt and just had no idea, no concept of how to deal with it. And we were really in a very fundamentalist church group that always said, God will fix it, God will fix it, God will fix it. So I'm like, okay, any day now, waiting for God to write the check. And that didn't happen. So we were just clueless. And, the friend that sat down with us and helped walk us through that and set up a 5-year plan, which for us was just like forever. 5 years, we didn't even know how long that was. And it actually took us 5.5 years because we ended up buying a minivan because we had too many children for our little car at that time. But anyway, just the intentionality of it. And I remember at the end of that month, that very first month, sitting down, and there were still several days left in the month, and we were $186 away from our goal to meet budget. And I knew a job I was about to collect on that was more than that, and I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, this is just magic. What happened? Is it, in fact, not the apocalypse, what's it called? The rapture. The rapture has occurred, and so we're actually going to meet our goal this weekend. I was startled. I just couldn't believe that this was doable because it had all felt so mystical and non-understandable for so long.
And we're starting with that. For us, because it was at a time where, did you say $38,000 back in the 80s? That was a lot of money. That it just seemed hopeless. Like we would never, almost like you accept it. Of course, you're going to be in debt the rest of your life, paying on credit cards that have a 21% interest rate. Like that was just like, isn't that what everybody's doing out there? And when we started seeing that living intentionally, because it's not that I was a stay-at-home mom and you were working construction at the time. It's like, it wasn't that all of a sudden I went and got a job or something, but on his income as self-employed, we started seeing that being aware and making and setting goals and being intentional actually has fruit. There's fruit in that. Yeah. And then I don't know at what point, because it was still during that time that we realized we can pull our kids into this. Like we can include them in our weekly business meetings in the sense of, and again, it's age appropriate. So our kids were young, but we knew that we as a family need to be on the same page. They need to understand the value of money. They need to understand that every time, I remember having those conversations like, guys, every time we go to the grocery store, we're not going to buy something that's in the checkout line just because it's in the checkout line. And we're going to talk about this before we go into the store, that we're not going to do that. We're not going to go down the toy aisle. I don't know if grocery stores even still have that, but we're not going down that aisle of the grocery store. Right. And it's that developed into our kids being part of the team and understanding what finances are, what a budget is. Of course, the older kids understood better than the younger kids. But I remember we also were pretty good at realizing we had to make them fun. So it was always, the kids looked forward to it. We usually had them on Sunday nights or Sunday afternoons, some time in there. And they weren't very long. Yeah. But it was like, okay, this is when we're going to sit down and have some ice cream. And then we're going to talk about, hey guys, what worked this week as a family? Like we started approaching it like we're a team. Our family is a team. It's a family, and we're all a part of this team, and we're going to make this work. And I don't know that we realized how powerful that would be, and how our kids had incredible suggestions on how to run things smoother, better, how to get, chores done more efficiently, how to have a voice, like giving them a voice where they could say, don't think it's fair that I have to unload the dishwasher every single day. Can we switch this up? Our kids had a voice, and we were like open to hear them. And okay, how would you like to see this run? But even it's interesting because some of the kids would be, one child would say, I think we watched too much TV last week. And then another one would go, what? And that just led us into, okay, let's hear that. What is your thought? And we came up with ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But it was that time when our kids were able to see that we were going to listen. We were going to hear what they thought and what they had to say. Yeah. And we laugh now because we always say, and we still say, that they were all stricter than Dad ever was. Like when they came up with something, they were going to follow that rule. Yeah. Where Dad was always like, can't we make an exception here?
Yeah, and I want to make it abundantly clear to everybody, we missed on so many things as parents, so we're not presenting ourselves as the prototype by any means. But a few things we did well on, and that was one of them early on. And so many of these things we don't remember if somebody told it to us or we just, between the two of us, thought of it or what. But we told our kids early on that they didn't get a vote, but they had a voice. It wasn't a democracy. Mom and Dad are running this benevolent dictatorship. We actually make the decisions, but they knew that they had a voice. And our adult children now, it's amazing having conversations with them where they felt seen and heard, and they felt that they had input. And I was always amazed in our family business meetings at how strict they were on themselves. And again, as Phyllis said, she didn't say this part, but I was actually the weakest link because I'm sitting there arguing with the kids like, no, that's because literally they would say things like, and we homeschooled, and they would say, okay, no television. And they said until everyone's schoolwork is done. And so I'm sitting over there as the weakest link going, well, that's not fair. What if this kid gets done earlier? And they're like, no, Dad, it needs to be everybody because we're in this together. And it developed such teamship for them, and they would encourage each other, oh, hurry up. And this is back when you had to actually schedule TV programs, that this comes on at 4. And so they develop that teamship. And I'm thinking, no, shouldn't it just be for each individual? And they're like, nope. It's everybody gets it done, or none of us get to watch this show, 4 o'clock, whatever. We nailed that they developed that teamship among them where they were pulling for each other, and they very much felt that they had a voice and that they were in on this. Because we skipped to that part, but what we encourage couples to do, because understand a marriage is a business, and I know it's a marriage, it's an unusual type business, but all the things that describe a business and that are needed for business are true of marriage. So yes, it's a marriage, it's a relationship, but you're running a business. And if you don't run it like a business, if you don't run it intentionally, you will not win. There's not a business on the planet, there's not a sports team on the planet that accidentally wins. You'll never hear an interview after somebody wins the Super Bowl and they go, we didn't even plan this. Like, we didn't have any meetings. We just showed up. I raised my hand. I said, I'll be a wide receiver. And that really big guy over there said he'd block. They had literally hundreds and perhaps thousands of meetings planning on this just to win the Super Bowl. And your marriage, your family is a lot more important than any football team, any football game. Weekly, you have a meeting, just the two of you with your partner, where you plan the week, and we encourage you to ask 3 questions. Number 1, what worked last week? What happened that were joy points, wins, so that you know what those are. And then you say, let's do more of those. And then the second question is, what didn't work? What happened with the things that were pain points, defeats, struggles? How can we shift those, adjust those, delete those, whatever needs to happen? And then the third question is, what's our schedule? Just so that you're not, because I hear from families all the time that are just constantly blindsided.
Yeah.
And life comes at you fast, and you're busy. And you need to know that Thursday at 4, you have this thing scheduled. Because if you don't, Thursday at 4 is going to come, and it's going to be last minute. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, we didn't plan it. So you literally go over your calendar. I encourage couples to have a journal, to have something where they keep track of their business meetings. Then you also have a morning business meeting, which is going to be about 5 minutes. The weekly business meeting is probably going to be 30 to 45 minutes. It could be longer, but whatever you need. You probably need 30 minutes. And your daily meeting is going to be about 5, perhaps 7 minutes. When you're doing the same 3 questions, what worked yesterday that we want to do more of that? What didn't work? And what's our schedule for the day on your market, set, go? Then you have a weekly business meeting with your kids. And again, that's age appropriate. We actually have a formula that you go through to figure out how long, but it's probably going to be somewhere 10 minutes or less. But we still would make it really special. We do, again, popcorn, ice cream or something, because the kids need to know that this matters. This is significant. This isn't just a random mom and dad are pulling us aside, making us sit down. No, this is our team meeting. It needs to be like undone, that they feel the significance of this, and you do that every week, and they very much get the sense that, okay, we're on a team here. Most parenting is set up adversarially. It's us against them, and they live their life that way. Yeah. And I think that's a cultural thing. I'm not sure how we ended up there, maybe centuries old, but we want this to be a team thing where we're pulling together.
I was just thinking, because back when we started, we did not have the connection code. So we didn't have the core emotion wheel. We did not know how to even connect or get that connection with our kids to find out what was happening with them emotionally. And for those of you who are listening, where this idea is new, and even if you're still doing it, I would really say this is the piece that I wish we'd have had back then, where we could have started our meetings with the core emotion wheel to hear. Because there was a lot, I remember, where it was, we wanted each child to have a voice to say what was happening with them. Now that our kids are adults and we do a lot of talking, we're very close to our kids, we do hear about childhood pain that they had that I don't know that I was aware of when they were that age. And I wish I'd have had these tools to have given them the language to tell me that they were hurt by their sibling or by a friend in the neighborhood. Like I missed those things. We were probably more logistical during our business meetings, talking more how to function logistically, and where I think the emotional component is so huge, where each child in the family can feel heard and seen is so important. And I think about even just with those dynamics. And for some of you listeners, you may be going, there's so many trigger topics. Just like sitting down and talking about finances would cause a huge explosion. Right. And so to me, that is what's so incredible about the connection codes and the tools, is to be able to go, okay, I don't want to pretend like this isn't like a topic that we can't touch. I want to touch all topics. But you got to go, how do we start? Where do we go with this? I don't even know how to have a business meeting because we can't talk about our finances because all we do is fight about our finances. Right. And so for some of you, you may have to start small. Start with issue-specific wheels, touching those topics. And your finances may be in a state of mess where you need an outside voice to create that safety where you feel like, I don't want to keep living like this. And thankfully, I would say that's one of the things we've shared before, that when we first were married, money was not something we fought about. We were both pretty much on the same page with money. And so that didn't cause the tension. But I know for some couples, that's a huge one. That's one where there's, can't even. We don't see it the same. We don't spend money the same. We don't, one part maybe a saver, the other's a spender. You hear all this. And so you just go, yeah, we can't even talk about it. But that is not what we want, is for you to be able to talk about it. You've got to talk about it. Yeah. That's how you build a partnership. That's how you build a healthy family. That's how you build a healthy business, is to be able to talk about every part of it, even when it's painful and difficult and not an easy topic to talk about.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. One of the things that I think about with the business meetings, one, like with just the two of you, I love, Glenn, the example that you gave of a football team doesn't just show up and win the Super Bowl. And I do think that so often many of us get caught up in just life. Mm-hmm. We are all busy. And yeah, we can sit here and argue their different levels, but everyone feels busy. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy to just let the days pass. But when we let the days pass, then we're no longer in control of those days. And you will fail. Mm-hmm. You will fail if you aren't in the driver's seat of your life. And setting up this weekly time to meet helps you be in the driver's seat. And I love the different topics that you can talk about. I love y'all talked about finances, because I think that's a huge one to discuss at the business meeting. Wes and he has handled our finances for the last year. There have been different seasons of our lives, depending on our schedule, where one of us will step in and be the main one in control. And he's done it this last year. And he's like, can we actually just take turns every week? Mm-hmm. This week, I'll do the organizing. Next week, you do the organizing. So we always know within a week of where we're at and what we're doing. And then we can, at the business meeting, switch roles. Mm-hmm. And then also for our date nights, he's like, how about we each take a month? So this month, you're in charge of the babysitter, the restaurant reservation, the plan. Next month, I'll be in charge of those things. And what that does is it helps even out the mental load for both of us. Mm-hmm. We're both equally showing up in those spaces, and we both can serve each other. And so then also the sex date. When you're in your business meeting, talk about, okay, we're looking at our schedule for the week. We know Thursday we have baseball and soccer. That's probably not the best night. Or you have to be up at 5 a.m. for a meeting in town. So pick a different night. Those help you think about your life in a way of, what are we trying to achieve? And are we staying connected as we are achieving it? And then bringing the kids in, that was probably the most shocking part of parenthood for me, because it's not that we've never operated from like the authoritarian position. Our kids have always had a voice in our house, but I never felt like they needed to know anything. We'll just tell you 10 minutes before soccer to put on your cleats and let's go out the door. And because we as parents, we look at our kids and think they don't really care, about when we have to be certain places. But when we changed that for them, everything shifted. I spent $30 on Amazon and I had a calendar on my refrigerator. That was the month calendar. And then I had our weekly calendar that I would update at the business meeting, and it would show what we had that week. And it was like peace washed over, especially for my oldest 2 children. They could walk up to the calendar and be like, okay, the birthday party is on the 16th. Yep. Today is the 1st. Okay, I have 16 days between now and the birthday party. So one, it helped eliminate a lot of questions in my house of how many days till this? When is this? Where are we going? What do we have Thursday? Yeah. And it really released a lot of anxiety for them because what I didn't realize was the lack of scheduling and routine for them. Yep. They were in a place of unknown all the time. And when we are operating from a place of unknown, even when we're 5 years old, that's a lot for our brains. So by including them, it gives them the structure that they actually need, and that we as adults need to realize our kids are whole humans. Right. I get really frustrated. For a while, I'd go to a restaurant and they'd be like, 2.5. It's like, no, this is a whole human here. There's no half human. And I think we view our kids as like halves. We don't see them as, no, they're a person with a voice and needs and desires. And if we can include them in on what we're doing as a family, it helps them to have that identity.
Yeah, and I tell couples a lot that there are many times that you convey something to a child and they don't know what it means, but they know it means something. So for you to say to your youngest, okay, here's the plan, Friday at 9 a.m., he doesn't really know what that means exactly. That's a time is such a construct, but he knows it means something. He knows my family has a plan. We're not just lackadaisical, flying by the seat of our pants, and who knows what's happening next. He knows there's a plan, even if he doesn't grasp it all. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, I love what you say, that just the anxiety level comes down. So now these kids are not just, it's like, I don't know what the heck's happening, and mom and dad just run the show. No, now they're in on this. And the other thing is, and you're going to experience this so much in the coming years, Tira, now whenever you have teenagers, you have a freaking team in your home. And in our culture, teens are anathema. And it's even understood. People go, oh, they're just teenagers. Doesn't have to be that way. And again, we missed plenty of things as parents. Our kids in their teenage years, we were not at war. I mean, we had our struggles. We had our challenges. This was pre-connection codes for us, so we missed a bunch of things. But we were a team. And watching our children be teammates is a phenomenal just experience. So over the coming years, you're going to have all these teammates that are actually helping you. And as connection coders, they're going to be connection coding with you. And your 15-year-old is going to go, what just happened there? I think I might have missed something. And you will process through things in 30 seconds, whereas most people with their teens don't process it in 3 years, if ever.
Let me say that my 4-year-old is asking me.
Yeah.
I was having a moment in the kitchen a couple of weeks ago where he could tell that I was heightening, and he goes, oh, Mama, what are you feeling?
Wow. That's amazing.
At 4. And it's because we do the core emotion wheel with him. It's because we ask him what's happening with him, and because we clue him in on what those things are. Yeah. So I very much look forward to the teen years, because I will say our business meetings, they are not flowing super whimsically where everyone is chill and getting along yet. I have tiny humans in my house still. And my 4 and 6-year-old don't care to sit for long periods of time. So our meetings with them need to be much shorter. And we definitely try to include certain things for them. But we check in every day. What went well today? What did not go well today? I love phrasing it the way you did, though, of what worked yesterday. And because that changes the dynamic a little bit of that. But absolutely having the system set up now to where when they're teenagers, that's very exciting.
So that, and again, your 4-year-old, so that your 6-year-old can say, well, yesterday that was really hard for me. And most parents have no idea. It's amazing to me when I sit more with couples than with families as a unit, but I'm amazed, and I don't want to say every time, I think it's every time, that I sit with a family and these parents are shocked. They had zero idea that this, whatever this is, was happening with their 4-year-old, their 8-year-old, their 15-year-old, because they've never found out. They're not a team. They have no idea what's happening with the other team members because they don't function.
I'm thinking back to this time in our life, and this was in the early 90s. that we had left Boston and moved back to South Carolina. And it was when I remember it was a school counselor that said, one of our kids, he said he deals with a lot of anxiety. And of course, we were just shocked to find that out. And he said he needs to know the plan.
Yeah.
And it just, as a mom, I was just like, what do you mean our kids need to know the plan? Like when I say get your shoes on, we're going, it's obey, get your shoes on, we're going.
Yeah.
Right.
And this was a fabulous counselor because he was very patient with me, because for him it was just like, I hear that, but your little guy needs about 5 minutes to just consume that idea that in 5 minutes he needs to put on his shoes. Mm-hmm. He said, try that, and I think you will get a much different response. Yeah. I thought it was just an obedience issue. I didn't realize it was an anxiety issue, that the way we lived, we were super, I would say, spontaneous, maybe is the word. You never knew. Every day of the week looked a little different. Yeah. Our activity level looked different. And we didn't clue our kids in ahead of time. It was just a matter of, I was aware of the calendar. And so I would be like, okay, put your shoes on, we're going. And he would have a complete meltdown. And he was probably 6 years old. And for years, he'd reacted that way, just meltdowns. And it's, because I'm springing everything at the last minute on him.
Yeah.
And there was not consistency for him. And so it was just this huge aha moment of, my kids would function better if they actually knew the plan.
Totally.
And I need to give them time, not spring it on them at the last minute. I know all day long, I've known that we've got soccer practice tonight. But he didn't, or she didn't know until I'm ready to go. And then I'm like, okay, guys, we got to go. Get your shoes on. And then there's that reaction of, what?
Yeah.
And so it was such a huge shift. And I think about that, even, of course, now, many years later, we all have our devices. We have ways to keep up with our calendars differently. But I always think when you start with kids, you've got to make it kid-friendly. Like what you're saying, and I'm already thinking you need to add the link to somehow people will know what you use. As far as it's got to be whoever the youngest member of the family is, it's got to be so that person can understand the calendar, can understand the plan. I'm thinking of stories even right now as y'all were talking about our 5-year-old granddaughter. For months now, she's been asking me what is on my calendar. Do you know what day of her birthday? She's been asking me this for months, and her birthday is in February. And she'll say, what is on your calendar? So that's her lingo. And I'll be like, let me look. And of course, my calendar is on my phone. And so I'll look on my phone. And of course, I know it's her birthday. And she goes, I want to spend the night before. I want to wake up at your house on my birthday. Wow. And I want my cousin Ruby to be there. And Ruby's 4. So these little 4 and 5-year-olds have been talking to me. They've been planning this birthday thing. And I went to my daughter. I said, do you know that this is going on? But I love that in her mind, she may not know how many days until her birthday.
Yeah.
But she already has a plan. Yeah. And she knows that I have a calendar. So she wants to make sure she's on my calendar. And I think, wow, that's so amazing that young ones understand the concept of the importance of calendar.
Yep.
And I think that's where it takes the organization as a parent to run this business, this family very well, but you do have to put things into place. I think what you're saying is you've got it on the side of your calendar. No, fridge, sorry.
Yeah, it used to be on the side of my fridge. It's electronic now on the counter with emojis, so my 4-year-old can see what his chores are that day. When it's a broom, he knows he has to sweep.
Wow.
And so we just switched to electronic within the last 3 months. But we used the laminate calendar on the fridge for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
And it did. It's interesting. I love that you said that your kids have to switch gears, but more than just 5 minutes. They need a warning.
Yeah.
Because I also think sometimes we don't give them a warning because it's easier for us. Right. Because we don't even want to manage the emotion going into it. I've talked a lot about Wes traveling. He used to travel quite a bit. And we would be like, no, don't tell them until the day you're leaving or the day before you're leaving because, I don't want to deal with that for the next week of all the questions. And now I look back and think, oh man, I would tell my kids about an hour before that, Papa's about to go out of town for 6 days. And the anxiety, because I wanted my life to be easier. And so now Wes is leaving in 2 weeks for a trip, and we're already like, last night, how many days until Papa's leaving? We'll tell you. Because we want you to go ahead and be mentally prepared going into these big things. Yeah. And it's on our calendar. They can walk into our kitchen. They can hit the buttons. Walter made sure that his LeBron James tickets are on our calendar as soon as we gave it to him. He literally opened up Christmas morning, got tickets, walked to the calendars like, okay, they're on the calendar, January 30th.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it teaches them life skills that to me are incredible.
I have to interject that because you said it so quickly, Tira. You said your 4-year-old knows that there's sweeping involved. I sit with families all the time that, and I don't even know what their thinking is, but their thinking seems to be that once the kids turn, pick a number, 15, 18, 21, they will magically overnight know what to do and how to do it. I don't question for a second that a 4-year-old does not sweep really.
It's not great.
But you're training a 4-year-old to be an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old. And if you don't do that, you're going to have an incompetent 18-year-old. And I've sit with so many. I mean, we had some people visit us recently, and these young men are in their 20s. They don't know how to do anything. They're getting Phyllis to help them do their laundry. And I think they're in their mid-20s. And I'm like, what happened? How was all of this missed? And they're precious people. I'm not mad at them, but I'm just thinking that's really bad. And so many parents I see out, and I believe it's a good heart, good intention, good motivation, horrible application. They love their kids, and so they do everything for them. And now this 15-year-old, this 18-year-old doesn't have a clue, literally, how to boil water, how to do virtually anything. There's no level of competency. And so for a 4-year-old to do a really poor job of sweeping is awesome.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Will that create even more work for mom and dad? Maybe, but not in the big picture, not in the long term. And I just see that culturally that kids don't have a work ethic. I see so many people that are 20, 22 years old, and they've literally never really worked in their whole life. And now we think magically they're going to develop a work ethic, and it's not true. It doesn't work that way.
I just love, it goes back to what we're talking about, that the weekly business meetings, because those are the times, like for you guys, you're major techie people, so it makes sense that you have it all on a device. Not everybody is that, but there is formulas, like there's paper calendars, there's lists, there's star charts, like whatever, but it's that intentionality that says we're going to show up in this space and function as a really, like we're all moving in the same direction. Right. And that also gives you space, to me, to hear what's working well in your family and just show up in that, because you hear each other. And back in 2020, when we were doing the webinars live, I remember some families would share, they watched them as a family, and then they would do the experience assignments together. And I remember one family said, when they talked about what brings you identity and when do you lose identity, and in that particular moment, the dad of the family says, I lose a lot of identity when I come home from work at night and no one asks me about my day. And part of it was no one thought to ask him about his day. And it was like, we assume you've had a hard day, so you don't want to talk about it. And yet that dad lost identity because no one seemed to acknowledge that he works hard every day. And then the younger children of that family were able to talk about, I lose identity when I ask you to play Legos with me and you're always too busy. And so it's so good both for the siblings, but also for the parents, just to hear that loss or gain of identity. And so for many of you, the tools that you're learning through connection codes, the practical tools, and you may have started this journey with really only having your marriage in mind. But when you think about, okay, I can use all of this with my whole family. And if we're intentional and we are sitting down, we're talking today about a business meeting where you're just tuning into each other, start that with the wheel, hear how everyone is doing. It's so powerful as far as, we're living life intentionally. Yeah. And then and having that plan. And I love that too, which is kids need to know the plan. And yes, I hear, Tira, with you sharing like, ugh, you used to just wait until an hour before Wes went out of town because it may have been easier on you, but actually it wasn't on them.
Yeah.
And so then that anxiety that it caused them actually made your work harder.
Totally.
Your life harder. Where now they know, they can trust, they're going to know when Papa goes out of town and what the plan is, and they can go to the calendar and they can look ahead. And it's those things that help a family run smoothly. And then if you're listening today and you're like, wow, don't even know where to start because we don't even touch so many topics. And I do want to end on this. I know we're running out of time. We spent, as a Connection Codes family, we spent 2023 having some really hard conversations. And we even hired a business coach to come in and to help us find our roles, find our financial commitments to the business, find our goals for the future. And it was very intentional to bring in a business coach.
Yeah.
And some of you listening, you may go, ooh, we need a family coach. We need like a marriage coach. And this is 2024. Make those investments. I just look at where we are now.
Yeah.
And I look backwards, and all the painful moments of 2023 were worth it to get us to where we are January of 2024.
Yeah.
Like in such a huge way. And so if you're listening and you're just thinking, ugh, that just sounds painful. I won't say it won't be full of painful, but man, where it gets you is incredible.
Yeah.
And these are definitely the tools that can help with each step of the way in this venture.
Yeah, and I can't help but put in a plug. We're starting our Connection Codes coaching certification, and to have more people available. Phyllis and I have X number of hours a week. But, by April, May, we'll have certified coaches that will multiply the availability for people, which is, I'm just so hyped about that. That's just going to, because it's true for everybody. And that's important that each listener recognizes it's not your personal issue. It's a human issue. Everybody on the planet needs outside. We call it cyclation, psychological isolation. Nobody can function well in cyclation. So you need outside input. Maybe you do one thing really well. So, this person makes a ton of money and he's on his 5th divorce. Yeah, that means that he needed a coach in there. I'm not questioning he doesn't have some sort of gifting, but each of us has so many blind spots, things we just miss, things we need coaching with. And so anyway, I'm just super excited that we're going to have more and more availability to help people with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very exciting. And yeah, I love just everything that y'all are saying about get outside help. And we really want to help you set up 2024 so as a year that you can look back on and be like, I was in charge of my life that year. Yeah. Life wasn't happening to me. Even in the hard moments, I was in the driver's seat of those moments. And so that's why last week we wanted to talk about the idea of being a learner, continuing to learn and continuing to grow. And this week talking about creating a team in your marriage, in your home, through the logistic of a business meeting. And I'm going to create a PDF for you and they'll be linked in the show notes, where you can download the questions that we ask, the framework of what this business meeting can look like. So you can start this Sunday. Wow. You can download the PDF. You'll know the questions. You'll know the layout of what to do. And I'll include the links to the calendar for your wall. I'll also link the electronic calendar. So you'll have everything you need to set yourself up for success. And that'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, and let me say real quick, because one of the things that you do on the third question, which is what's our schedule, is to schedule your next business meeting. Because my fear is that people have one of these and go, well, it didn't go there. No, you need to have a year's worth of these. This just needs to become automatic for you. That's when you start seeing so much traction and so much power. And 6 months later, you're like, oh, shoot, now we're on point.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next week.
Oh, cool.
The idea that we talked about this morning, the expiration date.
Yeah.
So next week, we are going to have the conversation about building the stamina to make this a lifestyle and not just a moment. And so that's what's coming your way. And we hope you tune in. we end every single episode doing the core emotion wheel, which is the 4-minute tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis developed to use at the beginning of those meetings so you can connect emotionally quickly and at your core. So you're not wasting time fighting about the logistics. You're connecting over what you're experiencing in your body. So we're going to demonstrate and...
Yeah, so let's do it on the new year. Issue specific about 2024. Can we do that?
Then you probably should start because you already had that on your mind.
You're ready.
So tons and tons of joy. I really do. As you mentioned, I think we wrestled through so many things in 2023 and 2024 is already off to a rip-roaring start. And so many, it's just flooded with joy about the power of that and the things that are going to happen. Always fear for me that I'm not going to be adequate. I'm not going to be, that I'm going to miss stuff. There's a shame in that. This, oh my gosh, I wish I was more on point. I wish I did things more smoothly. And that's the fear, is just that I'll miss with things. Pain's in general connected to that there's hurt at times. I'm like, I just feel hurt that I don't do better. It feels weird to say I hurt myself, but I think in ways that I do, where it's just maddening that I'm not more on point with things. Sadness in that at times. And then some loneliness, just this is a really big mission. And I know we're all in on this together, but it's still lonely because there's 8 billion of us on this planet, and we really feel such a pressing need to reach 8 billion people, which we're outnumbered. We like Tara, but it's still 8 billion to 3. Although we have Maria too, so we're getting there. But it's still loneliness in that is such a big task, big undertaking. Let me see. Oh, anger, really driven in all of this, because I know, number one, I know this it's urgent, it's huge, it's massive. We see what's happened for us. We see what's happened for so many people around us. And I know that we're going to get there. And I'm just adamant that we're going to keep growing and making this happen.
Wow. Okay. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around the issue specific here, because where my mind goes in 2024, I think about anger is a driver, and I really want to grasp that. So for me, I have anger that I don't tap into anger more as a driver. I think that, as y'all know, that's a hard one for me. I feel guilt and shame in just at the moment that I am not totally prepared to hit the ground running in 2024. I feel like I had a very busy holiday season. So I feel some guilt and shame that I'm not there. And then I think joy, though, and I've expressed this especially to the two of you, I do think I feel so much joy that we are set up to have an incredible year. I can't remember having a January, starting in January, where I felt this confident and excited for this year. So a lot of joy in that. Very different than where I was January of 2023. So can't wait to see what all happens this year. And I would say the pain region of my brain, which is lonely, sad, and hurt, it's probably a combination of all of those, of just, to me, it gets down to the nitty gritty and just the relational stuff, like lonely sometimes in all the logistics that I feel on my own about. Definitely sad and hurt when you and I get off, and even starting the new year, we've just had some logistical things that have been a little tough the last few days in making decisions, which is my fear even today was just, how are we doing, team? How are we doing? Are we still, it's the very beginning of January, but are we good? Are we? And I feel fear there, and started today definitely with some fear, but a lot of joy because I think we're going to do this. And so a lot of joy in that. I think that's all of them.
Wow.
I love that.
Thank you. Love it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am still honestly amazed. Sorry, now I'm calling out our podcast listeners to know how many of you still have not done the core emotion wheel yourself. We do it every episode, and we've talked to people and they're like, yeah, this is my first time. And it's, guys, this is the thing that will help you get what's happening in your body out of your body. And we have multiple episodes. We did one on loneliness recently about the effects of having emotion in your body and what it's doing to you. So I am going to include the core emotion wheel on that PDF that you're going to download to get your business meeting started right. So you'll be able to print this download. It'll have the core emotion wheel at the top. It'll have your 3 questions, and it'll set you up for each week being able to connect with your partner, with your family, so you can be in the driver's seat of your life.
I have to say, because you said that, I saw with the couple yesterday, they printed it off 20 times. They have 20 core emotion wheels around their house, in their car. I'm like, yes. And I don't know if people know that. You can print it off more than once. Put it everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. We have them all over our house as well, which is why I'm frustrated when I never have one in here. I need to just tape it to the table. But we are so glad that you are here. We have so much joy in the community that we have built, that we are building through this podcast, through the connectors of the Done Foundation and that are getting this word out. I encourage you to share this episode with your friends that are also really wanting 2024 to be different than 2023. They're ready to stop letting life happen to them. Share this episode with them. And we do all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this. So let's do this.
Let's do this.